Welcome to the Living the Dream podcast with Curveball. If you believe, you can achieve. Welcome to the Living the Dream with Curveball podcast, a show where I interview guests that teach, motivate, and inspire. Today's guest is Jody Zarn. She is an author, corporate trainer, and TEDx speaker, and her work revolves around empathy, mental health, and the power of human connection. We're going to be talking about a friendship that she formed with a homeless man, and Jody wants to let everybody know, look beyond the label and think about the human, because no matter what we go through or what we do or what label we have, we all are human beings. So we're going to be talking to Jody about that and everything that she's up to and going to be up to. Jody, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Curtis. This will be great.
Why don't you start off by telling everybody a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So, yeah, like you mentioned, I'm a corporate trainer in Canada. So that's kind of my daytime 9 to 5 job. But my real passion is helping people, and through small, random acts of kindness. I sometimes call myself a freelance philanthropist because sometimes you just fall into opportunities where you can help somebody in the community, and those experiences have really changed the trajectory of my life. And so yeah, the whole story that I have to share is based on buying people coffee and helping just random strangers as you go about your day, and how profoundly we can change people's lives just through those small acts of kindness.
Yeah, so tell us about how your friendship started with the homeless man, and tell us what that taught you about what the friendship taught you about empathy, dignity, and human connection.
Sure. Well, it's a wild story. I never thought that things would happen the way they did, but it's a crazy story. So I work downtown in the city where I live. It's Our offices are above a shopping mall. And so the fall of 2019, I hadn't been working at this place very long, and it was early November, and it was, just starting to get cold up here in Canada. And up here in the winters, it can be like wildly cold to the point where if your car breaks down on the highway, you're at risk of freezing to death very easily. And so as I headed into work that morning, it was still dark out. It was early, and I got into the lobby of the mall where my office is located, and there were two gentlemen standing on either side of the mall or the lobby. And you're not entirely sure that they're homeless, but they definitely look like they were down on their luck, and it was cold out, and I noticed that neither one of them had like a proper coat on, which just can't happen up here in that kind of weather. So I thought, well, these guys could use a coffee. I haven't bought anybody a coffee for a while, so I headed into a coffee shop that was nearby, and I got them each a coffee and a muffin. And as we do with social media, like if we do anything from getting a new hairdo or buying lunch or whatever, we put it on social media. And my friends and followers were quite used to me sharing, my little adventures buying people coffee, so they were used to it. So I snapped a quick photo, and away I went. And so the first man was a young guy, probably in his early 20s, 6 feet tall. I noticed instantly that he was missing the fingers on one of his hands. And I asked him if he'd like his coffee, and he said, yeah, sure. He was super happy. And so the second guy was on the other side of the lobby, and he was, I would say, late 60s. And again, no proper jacket. His pants were all ripped up. And as I approached him, I noticed that he was visually impaired. He couldn't see me. And so I approached and I said, hi. And I said, I've got a tea or a coffee. It was coffee the first time. And I said, I got a coffee and a muffin. Would you like some breakfast? And he said, I don't like coffee, but I'll take the muffin. So that was that. And, I didn't think anything of it because, I'd been doing this for years and years. And so I just fully expected to not see him again. So I went up to work, and that was that. And the next day when I returned, he was back there. And I thought, I wonder if he's back here because he's hoping that I might buy him buy him a cup of tea or something. So I approached him and I said hi, and I said, I know you don't like coffee, but can I get you something else? And he said, yeah, I'd love a green tea. And he said, are you the same person as yesterday? And I said, yeah. And he says, what's your name? So I said, Jody. And he said, well, I'm Leroy. And from that moment forward, we were best buddies. Leroy would show up every morning, and in the corner of the mall where the doors were, there was a little phone booth there. So it was kind of handy because he could stand in this little corner, and he would be safe from anybody who was passing by who maybe wasn't terribly friendly. And he had a spot where he could set his teas too. So every morning I would bring him, sandwiches from home and supplies like, socks or mitts or whatever he needed. And I'd go up to my office and I'd make him tea, and we'd have a little visit every morning. So piece by piece, 10 minutes a day for weeks, I got a chance to get to know Leroy and get to know his history and his story. And I think that, there are so many preconceived notions about who our homeless community members are, and what type of people they are, the character that they have. But, Leroy was really a special person because he came from a middle class life that anybody would aspire to. And he was wildly, wildly intelligent and became homeless, in a way that many of us could also end up on the streets. He had an eye surgery that went bad, and he lost his vision. His relationship with his life partner ended, and she kicked him out of the house. He suffered from mental health issues, and so it was kind of like this, perfect storm of everything happening all at once. And before he knew it, he was on the streets and couldn't get back to having long-term accommodations. So we began our friendship, and I never thought for a second that I could save him, because I don't work in mental health. I don't work in social services. I certainly didn't have enough money to like pay for rent for him. So I thought, well, the best I can do is be a friend to him, and I can be the sandwich girl. And so by doing that, I gave him a safe space to have somebody that he could trust. And we went on a life-changing journey that we eventually were able to get him off the streets and get him into long-term accommodations. And really impact people all over the country through sharing our story.
Well, talk about what assumptions about homelessness, trauma, and human behavior this relationship with Leroy challenged for you.
Yeah, great question. So, I think the biggest thing for me was, like, I didn't know anything about homelessness or homeless people. I never had a relationship with a homeless person before, so I didn't really know what to expect. And I didn't think I could do anything for him. I was really, I made sure not to promise anything to him because I didn't think I could really change his life. And one of the biggest things that I've learned over the course of our journey together, and even in recent years, is that, the small things have the biggest impact. And that can be in a positive way, and it can be in a negative way too. I really underestimated the power of just having those 10-minute conversations with him, or just hearing a story, or encouraging him, or validating that he was a good person. And for him, that was more important than, $100, really, because living on the streets, it's easy to eventually start to feel like you're invisible, and that you're not worthy, and that this is going to be your lifetime, of hardship, and that you maybe are a bad person. And so for him, being able to have a conversation with me, it showed him that he wasn't alone. And by me being able to validate him, like, Leroy, you are a good person and you're smart, and I see that, that reminded him that he was still a valuable person who still had a lot to offer the world. And it's funny, yeah, this past December, I went to a homeless conference here in the city, and they made a little video of people who had been on the streets. And one gentleman, he said the same thing. He said I was invisible out there, and people were afraid to look at me. People wouldn't smile at me. It was like I wasn't even there. And he said just even having a day where someone would make eye contact with me and smile, that was enough to get him through the day. So I think one of the biggest things was just recognizing that those small acts can really make a big difference to somebody's day, especially when, their entire life is burdened with hardship. And it's funny, like I just saw on Facebook the other day, there were some conversations online about homelessness, and it's funny, like some of the comments were, yeah, like these homeless people, like they're not like Leroy. They're just addicts, or they're mentally ill. And the way it was framed, it was as if, suffering from addictions or being having mental health challenges made you a bad person, and less than, and maybe not deserving of good treatment or social support. And the fact is, like, we all have mental health issues at some point in our life. Nobody gets through this life unscathed. And you know um having an addiction doesn't make you a bad person, because loads and loads and loads of people, who even maybe make six figures, suffer from addictions in some shape or form. And it still doesn't make you a bad person, and it doesn't make you unworthy of having a place to live and good treatment. So that's where I think the empathy really comes into play, is that we really need to remember that the people that we see on the streets, they're human beings. They've got parents, they've got family who are worried about them, who maybe don't even know where they are. They've got friends, they maybe had careers and huge accomplishments in their lives that nobody knew about. um, Leroy, for example, was the very best checkers player in all of Canada, and he was the third best in Barbados and the 12th best in the entire world. And I didn't know anything about checkers before, but apparently it's just as challenging a game as chess is. And he was wildly recognized and very well known, even in the Canadian and American checkers world. And yeah, he was a great guy. So all our people who suffer from adversity, everybody is still a person at the end of the day.
Yeah, I can tell you, as being a good checker player, I haven't played it in a while, that I've never played chess, but you definitely have to think a couple moves ahead. If I do this, the person can do this and do that. So, yeah, it can definitely be challenging. I love checkers, and even though he's visually impaired, they do have accessible checkerboards. So, hopefully, he's still playing out there.
Yeah, he was very, very smart. So Leroy actually passed away in the fall of 2021.
Oh,
And
sorry.
before he passed away, though, we were able to connect him with some of his checkers friends from abroad. So I think that was really special to him, because he would play checkers in his mind. Like, I don't know if you've seen that show, The Queen's Gambit, on Netflix, but the main character in that show, would play chess in her mind and visualize it on the ceiling. And that's exactly what he did. And he said that kept his mind sharp, so that when he was facing all these like life or death decisions when he was on the streets, trying not to get murdered or stabbed, um, that kept his mind sharp so he could stay alive out there.
Well, talk about what leaders can learn from your story about empathy, culture, and connection.
Yeah, that's a big one, especially in today's business world and our corporate world. So, you know, in the workplace, we have lots of demands. Lots of times you go into work, and there's these objectives that everybody's trying to hit. There's all these projects and milestones that people are working towards. And it's very easy to get caught up in progress and reports and that kind of thing. And it's so easy for the society as at a large to forget that we are people behind. At the end of the day, the foundation is we are people, and human connection is the foundation of everything that we do. And if we're working with people, I think empathy can sometimes be seen as like this fluffy soft skill. It's like hugs and prayers, and just kumbaya, that kind of thing. And that it's not really that important, because you just need to come in and, report your status and get your work done. But, often what happens is that if we forget the human behind the computer, then we're really we're missing out on understanding how people operate and why they operate, and maybe why they react to certain situations the way they do, and what their needs are. And corporate culture is a big thing. If you walk into on a department where the culture isn't so good, or morale is down, or productivity is down, turnover is high, that kind of thing. Maybe you've got a lot of people taking sick days, that kind of thing. What we really need to think about is, okay, I am working with this individual and there's clearly something going on. Maybe they're not meeting their objectives. So, what is the why there? What is the backstory that's going on with that person? And it doesn't mean that we're going to be best friends and, hug it out. It means that what we all need to do is kind of like stop, drop, and roll if there's a fire, but stop, drop, and be curious. Take a breath and be curious about, what's going on with your backstory, what's going on with your life, what. And if we can get a sense of just getting to know that person, and listening without agenda, just truly hearing. And that's a tough one to do, because often we'll listen, and before the person's done talking, we've already formulated our reply, so we actually haven't heard the person. So if you can just listen with an open heart, sounds super fluffy, but if you can just listen without agenda, to truly hear what the person is saying, and then ask the questions and be curious to really dig deeper as to, okay, so now I understand what your backstory is. Now I can understand, why you're reacting in a certain way and what your needs are. Then we can help improve relationships, and we can help people feel, like they're being heard and that they have value in their workplace. And people will work harder for you when they're engaged and they feel valued. One of the biggest things that I learned with Leroy was that I think for years he never felt like he was valued, and that the world didn't value him because they just saw him as a blind man or a homeless man or somebody with mental health issues. And so when I was able to build that relationship with him and give him that validation, saying, yeah, man, like, you are super smart, like, you are ridiculously smart. And he was, like, it wasn't lip service. He really blossomed, and then we were able to build that foundation. And I recognized to him, like, I couldn't stay alive on the streets. What you do night after night, fighting off murderers and attackers, and navigating the city in -40 to below weather, and getting around on your own, like, that takes a level of grit and street smarts that I just wouldn't have. And so being valued as a person or as an employee, being heard, truly heard by your team members, and being understood, and having that be a safe place, that will improve productivity, that will improve culture. Your retention will stay, because people don't leave corporations, they leave people. They leave teams, they leave places where they don't feel like they have a part in the world. And so, yeah, I think our story with Leroy has a lot of value in not only just the community or in the mental health world, but in the education system, in the workplace too, because I think there's a lot of employees out there who don't feel that sense of, you know human connection or value or validation, and it's demoralizing.
Let's take a quick break.
In Kansas, blind vending operators are vanishing without a trace. No bodies, no witnesses, only silence. Detective Michael Miguel thought he had seen everything, but this case pulls him into something far darker, a web of institutional corruption so deep it was never meant to be uncovered. When vulnerable blind people disappear and bureaucracies close ranks, one question remains: who will fight for justice? As Miguel digs deeper, he uncovers a conspiracy reaching the highest levels of power, a system that exploits the very people it was designed to protect. The truth is buried in paperwork, hidden behind closed doors, guarded by those who have everything to lose. Some conspiracies hide in plain sight. This one hides in the dark. Iron Cane Media presents The Blind Conspiracy, written by Mikhail Battles Sr., available now on Amazon.
Yeah, well, talk to the listeners about your book. Tell us what inspired you to write it, what we can expect when we read it, and where we can
Yeah,
get it.
good question. So yeah, so Leroy and I were together for 2 years before he passed away, and we were able to get him into long-term housing, which was really great. And this journey was really amazing because by sharing our story, our journey on social media, we quickly grew a community of people from all over Canada and the US and some in the UK of people who were really invested in his journey because they really connected with his story and they could relate. I got messages from people saying, I was homeless, or my uncle was homeless, or I had addiction issues, and people could really relate to what he went through and even his need to be seen and understood for who he was, because we all need that at the end of the day. And so I always knew that I wanted to tell his story, and then when he passed away, like I really felt compelled to share this wild story, because by the time he passed away, he had inspired people like all over the place, and really profoundly too. And I did a TED talk a couple of years ago, and I asked him, I said, could I do a TED talk? And he said, well, what's a TED talk? And I said, well, they have these conferences all over the world, and people just gather and tell these inspirational stories, just inspire people all over. And he said, well, would my story be inspiring? And I said, oh, heck yeah. And he said, well, would your son listen to it? And I said, yeah. And he said, do the TED talk. So after he passed away, I knew that I had to share his story, but what I didn't realize is that I needed to tell it properly, and by doing that, I had to tell my story too. And part of his story is talking about how he had mental health issues. Like that's definitely part of the issue. And uh, I realized while I was writing it that I couldn't in good conscience talk about his mental health issues if I didn't tell my own too, because like I mentioned, like we've all had mental health issues at some point. We don't, we've all experienced trauma to some degree, and so I couldn't share his journey without sharing mine too. And then as I was plotting out the story, I realized that the trauma that I'd experienced as a child, I had experienced some pretty heavy duty bullying as a student in school. What that did to me is it really affected the way I saw the world and how I treated people. And as I dealt with my childhood bullying, I was able to get to a place where I was able to love and accept myself for who I was. But then, without really planning it, I spent the rest of my life giving that kind of gift to other people who needed it, that sense of validation. Like, you are valuable, you're amazing for who you are. Like, you don't have to change to fit in. Like, you are amazing right now. And so by me dealing with my own mental health stuff, my journey, I was able to see that he needed somebody to kind of be in his corner to fight the fight with him, and remind him that he was a good person. And so the book is primarily, it's a kind of a braid between my journey and his journey, and then how they come together, and how we were able to teach each other some really big life lessons, like us having a sense of gratitude for whatever you have in life, no matter how tough life is, and celebrating people for who they are, and just connecting with that. So yeah, it's been a good journey. I've had a lot of people reach out to me about the bullying, actually. Like, I didn't want to put it in there, but a lot of people reached out that they too had been victims of childhood bullying, and so that's really struck a chord with a lot of people. So yeah, the book is called Higher Power Betty and the homeless man who changed my life, and it's on Amazon worldwide. So yeah, it's a cool story.
Well, talk about why do you feel that your story resonates with everyone, regardless of their background?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And it's funny, it's really resonating with people in a way that I didn't really expect, to tell you the truth, because I got so fixated on the Leroy stuff. But I think it boils down to the fact that we all at some point have had tough stuff in our life. We've all experienced trauma to some degree. We all maybe have had mental health issues. And at the end of the day, we all want to be seen and valued. And we are all connected through that need to be valued and human connection. And I think it's really struck a big chord with people. Like when I wrote the book, it was a scary thing, I'll tell you. Like, I mean, it's hard. Like when I started writing, I had never told anybody that I was bullied so badly. And for our listeners, like I was bullied so badly that I got to the point where I was considering taking my life, and I had never told anybody that. And there's this fear that you're not going to be believed, or that people are going to tell you that you're full of it. And quick disclaimer for anybody who is listening to this: if you are being bullied, or if you're going through something, and you're having some thoughts as to whether or not you should be here, I can tell you right now, you need to be here. You have a purpose in this life, and who you are is good and valued, and you need to stick around, and because the world needs you. The world absolutely needs you. So people, I think, are resonating with the fact that I was able to be so honest and vulnerable, because it's a hard thing to do. So I think I was able to give people something that to think about that maybe they hadn't expressed or felt themselves. I don't know if that makes sense, but it's a really honest book, and I think that struck a chord with people.
Well, tell us about any other upcoming projects that you're working on that listeners need to be aware of.
Yeah, that's exciting. So my goal eventually is to become a motivational speaker. So and we have anybody out there who needs a speaker, I am working towards that. I'd like to, speak to, corporations or mental health agencies, educators, that kind of thing. And so yeah, my goal is to speak and to develop, workshops and learning, that kind of thing, to keep spreading the message, because I think it's an important message that we all need to hear. And yeah, I've got another book in the works, a fiction book that is kind of loosely based on my mom's childhood. We talk about that a little bit in a Higher Power Betty. And yeah, we just got to keep spreading the message. We need to build that sense of human connection and empathy with people, so that we can make the world a little bit better place. And I think that we can do it. I think every person has the potential to make the world a better place just by doing one small act of kindness every day.
Well, throw out your contact info so people can keep up with everything that you're up to.
I appreciate that. Thank you. So you can find me at jodyzarn.com. So it's jodyzarn.com. And my book is on Amazon worldwide. So yeah, reach out if this podcast has resonated with you. I'd love to hear from you.
Absolutely. We'll close this out with some final thoughts. Maybe if there was something I forgot to talk about that you would like to touch on, or any final thoughts you have for the listeners.
Yeah, we've covered a lot of ground, that's for sure. But yeah, I think, you are a good person. Like if you're listening and you're having a tough time, you will get through it. You are not alone. There are people out there who care about you, and you don't have to change to fit into this crazy world. We need every shape, size. We need every characteristic. We need all the good stuff. And you are not defined by your mistakes or your past. You're not defined by anything but the magic inside your belly.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, jodyzarn.com is the place to go to keep up with everything that Jody's up to. And when she hits the stage near you to be a speaker, to to relay her message, please be sure that you attend, follow, rate, review, share this episode to as many people as possible. Also, to keep up with all things Living the Dream, please visit www.curveball337.com. Share the website and the show to everybody you know. Thank you for listening and supporting the show. And Jody, thank you for all that you're doing. And thank you for joining me.
Yeah, thanks for having me. This was awesome.
For more information on the Living the Dream with Curveball podcast, visit www.curveball337.com. Until next time, keep living the dream.